The metallic tang of blood mixed with something fouler hit Xavier Everett's nostrils before his eyes adjusted to the dim interior of the abandoned trading post. And in that instant, he knew someone was dying in the Arizona heat. He had been riding the dusty trail between Vulture City and the copper mines for 3 days straight, his horse exhausted and his own throat parched despite the canteen at his side. The year was 1882, and the Arizona Territory was still wild enough that stumbling upon death was more common than finding water. But Xavier had learned to trust his instincts during his years working cattle drives and breaking horses for the wealthy ranch owners who carved empires from this unforgiving landscape. Something about this smell was different. It carried desperation. Xavier dismounted quickly, tying his bay gelding to the weathered post outside. The trading post had been closed for months, ever since old Samuel Jenkins died without heirs. The door hung crooked on its hinges, and Xavier pushed it open slowly, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. Not because he expected trouble, but because trouble had a way of finding a man out here whether he looked for it or not. The interior was thick with dust and shadow. Broken crates littered the floor, and the shelves that once held supplies now stood empty, their wood warped by the relentless sun that baked through the gaps in the walls. Xavier's eyes swept the space methodically, and that was when he saw her. She was crumpled in the far corner, barely visible in the stripe of light that filtered through a crack in the boards. Her dress, once probably a modest calico print, was torn and soaked with blood that looked black in the shadows. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever pins had held it, spreading across the dirt floor like spilled ink. She was not moving. Xavier crossed the distance in 4 long strides, dropping to his knees beside her. The smell was stronger here, not just blood, but infection. His stomach turned, but his hands were steady as he gently turned her face toward him. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with fine features that spoke of careful upbringing, not the rough frontier life. Her skin was pale beneath a layer of dust and sweat, and her breathing came in shallow gasps that barely moved her chest. "Miss?" Xavier kept his voice low and calm, the same tone he used with skittish horses. "Miss, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Xavier carefully pulled back the torn fabric of her dress sleeve, and his jaw tightened at what he found. Deep gashes ran along her forearm, the edges ragged and inflamed. These were not clean knife wounds. They looked like she had been dragged through barbed wire or maybe attacked by some animal. But what concerned him more was the red streaking from the wounds climbing toward her shoulder. Infection had set in, and from the heat radiating from her skin, fever had taken hold. He checked quickly for other injuries, trying to maintain her modesty even as urgency pushed him to move faster. More wounds across her side, bruising on her ribs, cuts on her legs. Someone or something had hurt this woman badly, and she had been lying here suffering for what must have been at least a day, maybe longer. Xavier made his decision in an instant. Vulture City had a doctor, a man named Harrison, who had come west after the war and set up practice in a converted saloon. It was a hard ride, at least 2 hours, and every minute counted, but there was no choice. She would die here without help, and Xavier Everett was not the kind of man who could walk away from that. He stripped off his leather vest and laid it aside, then carefully, gently, slid his arms beneath her. She weighed almost nothing, her body limp and burning with fever. As he lifted her, she made a small sound of pain, the first indication she was even conscious. Her head lolled against his chest, and he could feel her rapid, thready heartbeat through her torn dress. "I have got you," he murmured, though he doubted she could hear him. "You are going to be all right." Getting her onto his horse was the hardest part. The gelding, usually steady, danced nervously at the smell of blood. Xavier spoke to him in low tones while he managed to get himself into the saddle with the woman cradled in his arms. It was not comfortable, and it was not graceful, but it would work. He settled her as gently as he could, her head resting in the crook of his left arm while he held the reins with his right. The ride to Vulture City was the longest 2 hours of Xavier's life. He pushed the gelding as hard as he dared, but with the double weight and the treacherous terrain, he could not risk a full gallop. The sun beat down mercilessly, and he tried to angle his body to give her some shade. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes crying out with words he could not understand, other times lying so still he had to press his fingers to her neck just to feel the reassurance of her pulse. "Stay with me," he found himself saying again and again. Just stay with me. We are almost there." He did not know her name. He did not know where she came from or how she ended up in that abandoned trading post. He did not know if she had family somewhere waiting for her or if she was alone in the world. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was getting her to Dr. Harrison before it was too late. Vulture City appeared on the horizon like a mirage, the wooden buildings shimmering in the heat. It was not much of a town, just a collection of structures built to support the nearby gold mine that had given the area its name. A main street of packed dirt, a handful of businesses, a church that doubled as a schoolhouse, and maybe 50 permanent residents if you counted generously. But it had a doctor, and that made it civilization enough. Xavier did not stop at the hitching posts. He rode straight up to the building with the faded sign that read "Medical Services," and nearly threw himself from the saddle. The woman in his arms had gone completely limp, her breathing so shallow he could barely detect it. Terror, sharp and unfamiliar, lanced through his chest. He had seen death before, had even dealt it out when necessary in this hard land. But the thought of this woman dying in his arms filled him with a desperation he had no name for. He kicked the door open with his boot, not caring that he probably startled everyone in a 3-building radius. "Dr. Harrison!" The interior was blessedly cool after the blazing heat outside. Dr. Harrison looked up from the medical book he had been reading, his weathered face registering surprise and then immediate professional concern. He was in his 50s, with gray threading through his dark hair and the kind of steady hands that came from years of practice. "Good God, Xavier, what happened?" Harrison was already moving, clearing off the examination table with one sweep of his arm. "Get her here, quickly!" Xavier laid her down as gently as if she were made of glass. In the better light, she looked even worse. Her face was waxen, her lips cracked and pale. The blood on her dress had dried to a rust color, and the smell of infection was unmistakable. "I found her in the old Jenkins trading post," Xavier said, stepping back to give the doctor room to work. "She was just lying there. Those wounds, they look at least a day old, maybe more." Harrison was already examining her, his fingers quick and sure as he checked her pulse, lifted her eyelids, began carefully cutting away the ruined dress to expose the injuries. His expression grew grimmer with each passing second. "This is bad, Xavier. Very bad. The infection has spread into her blood. See these red lines? That is poison traveling through her system, and she is severely dehydrated." Harrison looked up, his eyes grave. "I will do everything I can, but you need to prepare yourself. She may not make it through the night." Something twisted hard in Xavier's gut. "No, she has to make it. She did not survive whatever happened to her just to die here. I admire your optimism, but I am a doctor, not a miracle worker." Harrison was already moving, gathering supplies, heating water on the small stove in the corner. "I need to clean these wounds, stitch what I can, and get fluids into her. You should go get some rest. This is going to take hours." "I am staying." Xavier's voice left no room for argument. Harrison glanced at him with surprise, then something like understanding crossed his face. "All right then. Make yourself useful. There is clean cloth in that cabinet. Start tearing it into strips for bandages." Xavier threw himself into the work, grateful to have something to do with his hands. He tore cloth, fetched water, held instruments when Harrison needed them. He watched as the doctor cleaned the wounds with careful precision, revealing the full extent of the damage. She had been hurt badly, torn and beaten. Harrison's face grew darker as he worked. "Whoever did this should be horsewhipped," the doctor muttered. "These are not accidental injuries." "You think someone attacked her deliberately?" "I think someone tried to kill her and left her for dead." Harrison began stitching one of the deeper cuts with small, precise movements. "The question is why she was out there alone. Women do not usually travel these roads without escort." Xavier had been wondering the same thing. What was her story? Where had she been going? The questions circled in his mind as he watched Harrison work through the afternoon and into the evening. The doctor cleaned and stitched, applied salves and poultices, wrapped her wounds in clean bandages. He managed to get some water down her throat, though she remained unconscious throughout. Finally, as the sun was setting and orange light slanted through the windows, Harrison stepped back and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "That is all I can do for now. The rest is up to her and whatever higher power you might believe in. Her body needs to fight the infection, and she needs to be strong enough to win that fight." What are her chances? Xavier heard himself ask. Harrison sighed. Honestly, maybe 1 in 3. The infection is advanced, but she is young and she made it this far, which says something about her will to live. We will know more in the next day or 2. If she makes it through the fever, she has a real chance. Xavier looked at the woman on the table, now clean and bandaged, looking impossibly small and fragile. Her dark hair had been pulled back from her face, revealing the fine bones of her features. Even pale and unconscious, there was something striking about her, something that made him unable to look away. I will sit with her tonight, he said. Xavier, you have done enough. You saved her life by getting her here. Go get some sleep at the boarding house. I will sit with her tonight, Xavier repeated. Just tell me what to watch for. Harrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Watch her breathing. If it gets more labored or irregular, come get me immediately. Try to get her to drink water whenever she seems even slightly conscious. Put cool cloths on her forehead if the fever spikes. And Xavier? Talk to her. Sometimes people in this state can hear us even when they cannot respond. It might help anchor her, give her something to hold on to. After Harrison left, heading to his own quarters behind the office, Xavier pulled a chair up beside the examination table. The office grew dark, and he lit the oil lamp on the desk, adjusting it so it gave enough light to see by without being harsh. Then he settled in for what he knew would be a long night. The woman on the table remained still, her breathing shallow but steady. Xavier dampened a cloth in the basin of cool water Harrison had left and gently laid it across her forehead. Her skin was burning, the fever raging through her system as her body fought the infection. I do not know if you can hear me, Xavier said quietly, feeling slightly foolish but remembering Harrison's words. But the doctor says I should talk to you. I am Xavier Everett. I am the one who found you and brought you here. You are in Vulture City now, in Dr. Harrison's office, and you are safe. Whatever happened to you, whoever hurt you, they are not here. You are safe. He paused, listening to the soft sound of her breathing. Outside, the town was settling into its evening rhythms. He could hear occasional voices, the sound of horses, the distant tinny notes of a piano from the saloon down the street. I wish I knew your name, Xavier continued, surprised at how easy it was to talk to her in the quiet darkness. I wish I knew your story, how you ended up in that trading post, all alone and hurt. But we will figure that out later. Right now, you just need to focus on fighting. You need to keep breathing and keep your heart beating and come back to us. Come back to the world. Hours passed. Xavier refreshed the cloth on her forehead regularly, managed to get a few sips of water past her lips when she seemed to surface slightly toward consciousness. He talked to her about inconsequential things, about his life, growing up on a small ranch in Texas before coming to the Arizona territory seeking work, about the horses he trained, the cattle drives he had worked, the beauty of the desert that most people overlooked. He told her about watching the sun rise over the mountains, about the way the saguaro cactus stood like sentinels across the landscape, about the surprising abundance of life in this place that seemed so harsh and empty. You have to wake up to see it, he said, as midnight came and went. You have to wake up to see how beautiful it all is. I know it does not seem that way right now. I know you have seen the worst of this place, but there is good here too. There are sunrises that will take your breath away and stars so bright they look close enough to touch. There are people who will help a stranger just because it is the right thing to do. You have to stay and see it all. Around 2 a.m, she got worse. Her breathing turned harsh and ragged, and her fever spiked so high that Xavier could feel the heat radiating from her without even touching her skin. He refreshed the cool cloths constantly, but they seemed to make no difference. Her body began to tremble, and small sounds of distress escaped her lips. Xavier found himself on his feet, one hand gripping hers, the other pressing a cloth to her burning forehead. No, you do not get to give up. You hear me? You have fought this hard. You have come this far. You are not giving up now. He did not know if his words made any difference, but he kept talking, kept holding her hand, kept applying the cool cloths. He prayed, something he had not done since he was a child, asking whoever might be listening to spare this woman he did not even know. Please, let her live. Please, let her have a chance. Gradually, so gradually he almost did not notice at first, The crisis passed. Her breathing eased slightly. The trembling subsided. Her fever remained high but stopped climbing. Xavier sagged back into his chair, suddenly aware that he was shaking, that his shirt was soaked with sweat, the tears he had not known he was crying had left tracks down his dusty face. "That is it," he said hoarsely. "That is it. You are doing it. Just keep fighting." Dawn found him still in the chair beside her, his hand still holding hers. Dr. Harrison came in with the sunrise, took one look at Xavier's haggard face and the woman's slightly improved color, and nodded with satisfaction. "She made it through the worst of it," Harrison said, checking her pulse and examining her wounds. "The fever is still high, but it is stabilized. That's a good sign. A very good sign." "She's going to make it?" Xavier's voice was rough with exhaustion. "I think she has a real chance now, but she's not out of danger yet. She needs rest, fluids, and continued care. The next few days will tell us for certain." Harrison turned to look at Xavier. "And you need rest too. You look like death warmed over." "I'm fine." "Xavier, you cannot help her if you collapse from exhaustion. Go to the boarding house, get some sleep. I will watch her." Reluctantly, Xavier let himself be persuaded. He stumbled out into the early morning light, which seemed too bright after the long night in the dim office. His legs felt unsteady, and his eyes burned with tiredness. But as he made his way to Martha Henderson's boarding house, he felt something else too. A strange lightness, a feeling almost like hope. Martha Henderson was a widow in her 60s who ran the only respectable boarding house in Vulture City. She took one look at Xavier when he knocked on her door and immediately bustled him inside. "Xavier Everett, you look like you have been dragged behind a horse," she scolded, already heading to the kitchen. "Sit down before you fall down. I will get you some food." "I just need a room, Martha. I need to sleep." "You need food first. When did you last eat?" Xavier honestly could not remember. Martha seemed to take his silence as answer enough and set about preparing a breakfast that was larger than he could possibly eat. But he was surprised to find that once he started eating, he was ravenous. The food restored him somewhat, enough that he could make it up the stairs to the room Martha showed him. He intended to just rest for a few hours, but the moment he lay down on the bed, exhaustion claimed him completely. He slept through the entire day and into the following night, a deep, dreamless sleep born of complete depletion. When he woke, early morning light was filtering through the thin curtains. For a moment, Xavier was disoriented, unsure where he was or why every muscle in his body ached. Then memory flooded back. The woman, the ride, the long night watching over her. He was up and moving before he fully registered the decision to do so, splashing water on his face from the basin, pulling on his boots, heading down the stairs. Martha tried to insist he eat breakfast, but he promised to come back for it later. Right now, he needed to know if the woman was still alive. The morning air was cool and fresh, the sun just starting to heat the day. Vulture City was coming to life around him, but Xavier barely noticed. He strode to the doctor's office and pushed open the door, his heart pounding. Dr. Harrison was at his desk, writing in a ledger. He looked up as Xavier entered, and a smile crossed his tired face. "She is awake." The relief was so intense, it was almost painful. Xavier had to grip the doorframe for a moment to steady himself. "She is awake? She is talking?" "She woke up a few hours ago, still very weak but conscious and lucid. She's been asking questions, though I told her she needs to rest and preserve her strength." Harrison stood up. "I think she would like to meet the man who saved her life. Come on." Harrison had moved the woman to a small back room where he kept patients who needed extended care. It was simply furnished with a bed, a small table, and a chair, but it was clean and private. She was propped up on pillows, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her face still pale but with more life in it than Xavier had yet seen. And her eyes were open. They were green. A clear, striking green that reminded Xavier of new leaves in spring, startling in their intensity. Those eyes fixed on him as he entered the room, and he felt the impact of her gaze like a physical thing. "Miss Mercer," Harrison said gently, "this is Xavier Everett. He is the man who found you and brought you here." She studied Xavier for a long moment, and he found himself straightening under her scrutiny, suddenly aware of his rumpled clothes and unshaven face. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse but clear. "You saved my life. It was not a question, but Xavier nodded anyway. I just happened to be passing by at the right time. Dr. Harrison told me. She paused, seeming to gather her strength. He told me you rode for 2 hours holding me, that you stayed up all night watching over me. That is more than just happening to pass by. Xavier felt heat rise to his face, uncomfortable with her gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. I do not think that is true. Her green eyes held his, and he could not look away. But whether it is or not, I owe you my life. Thank you, Mr. Everett. Xavier, he said. Just Xavier. Katerina, she replied. Katerina Mercer. People call me Kate. Kate. The name fit her, strong and straightforward. You should rest. I just wanted to see that you were all right. Wait. The word stopped him as he turned to leave. Please. If you have time, could you stay? I have so many questions, and Dr. Harrison does not know the answers. Xavier glanced at Harrison, who nodded slightly. I will give you some privacy. But Kate, do not overtire yourself. You are still very ill. After Harrison left, Xavier pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. This close, he could see the fine lines of pain around Kate's eyes, the way she held herself carefully as if afraid any movement might hurt. She was beautiful, he realized, even pale and injured. There was a strength in her features, an intelligence in her eyes that spoke of someone who had seen hardship and survived it. What do you remember? Xavier asked gently. Kate's face tightened, and for a moment he thought she might refuse to answer. Then she took a shaky breath. I was traveling from Prescott to Tucson. My father is a prospector, and he'd gone ahead to secure lodging for us while I closed up our affairs in Prescott. I was traveling with a wagon train, but we were attacked 2 days out. Outlaws looking for gold or money or anything valuable. Her voice wavered, and Xavier resisted the urge to reach out and take her hand. She needed to tell this story, and he needed to let her do it at her own pace. They killed the wagon master and 2 other men. The rest of us scattered. I ran. I do not know what happened to the others. I just ran and kept running. But I was not fast enough. 2 of the outlaws came after me on horseback. Her hands clenched in the blanket. They caught me. They hurt me. And when they were done, they left me there to die. Rage, hot and fierce, surged through Xavier. He had known someone had hurt her deliberately, but hearing her say it, seeing the pain in her eyes, made him want to find those men and make them pay for what they had done. How did you get to the trading post? He asked, keeping his voice carefully neutral. I walked. I do not know how long. Hours, maybe. I was bleeding and everything hurt, but I knew if I stopped moving, I would die. When I saw the building, I thought maybe there would be water or shelter or someone who could help. But it was empty. I must have collapsed. I do not remember anything after that until I woke up here. You are incredibly strong, Xavier said, and he meant it. Most people would not have survived what you went through. Kate shook her head slightly. I did not survive it alone. You found me. If you had ridden past, if you had not stopped. She did not finish the sentence, but she did not need to. They both knew how close to death she had come. But I did stop. And you are going to recover. Dr. Harrison says you are doing better than he expected. He also says I will be here for a while, that I cannot travel for at least a few weeks, maybe longer. Kate's expression turned troubled. My father is expecting me in Tucson. He will be worried when I do not arrive. Do you know where he is staying in Tucson? We can send a telegram, let him know you are safe. Relief flooded her face. Yes, he's staying at the Grand Hotel, or at least that is where he said he would be. A telegram would be perfect. Thank you. I will take care of it today. Xavier stood up. You should rest now. I will check in on you later. Xavier, Kate's voice stopped him at the door again. Will you come back? To talk, I mean, if you have time. Something warm unfurled in his chest at the request. I will come back, I promise. He left before he could examine too closely why her request pleased him so much. He had work to do. There was a telegram to send, and he needed to see about finding those outlaws who had hurt Kate. They needed to answer for what they had done. The telegraph office was in the general store, and Xavier composed a brief message explaining what had happened and assuring Kate's father that his daughter was alive and being cared for. He paid for the telegram and then headed to the marshal's office. Marshal John Carter was a lean man in his 40s with graying hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. He listened as Xavier explained what had happened, his expression growing darker with each detail. "That wagon train was the third one hit in the last month," Carter said grimly. "Same gang, from the description. 4 or 5 men, well armed, targeting anyone who looks like they might have money. We have been trying to track them down, but they disappear into the hills after each attack. They know this territory." "They need to be stopped," Xavier said flatly. "I agree, but I am one man, and I have got an entire territory to cover. I have sent requests for help from Prescott and Tucson, but it takes time." Carter studied Xavier. "I heard you worked as a deputy down in Texas for a while." "A few years, yes, before I came to Arizona." "I could use someone with your experience. Temporary deputy work, just until we run these men down. It pays decent, and you would be doing a service to everyone who travels these roads." Xavier considered the offer. He had work waiting at the ranch where he usually hired on, breaking horses for the spring sales. But the thought of Kate's haunted eyes, of the pain in her voice as she described what those men had done to her, made his decision easy. "I will do it. When do we start?" "Tomorrow. I want to ride out to where the attack happened, see if we can pick up any trail. It has been a few days, but we might get lucky." Carter extended his hand, and Xavier shook it. "Welcome aboard, Deputy Everett." Xavier spent the rest of the day taking care of practical matters. He made arrangements for his horse at the livery, secured a long-term room at Martha's boarding house, and bought a few supplies he would need if he was going to be riding with the marshal. He also bought a book from the general store, thinking Kate might appreciate having something to read during her recovery. When he returned to the doctor's office that evening, Harrison was just finishing examining Kate's wounds. "The infection is improving," the doctor reported. "The red streaking is fading, and the wounds are starting to close properly. She's not out of danger yet, but the prognosis is good." Kate was sitting up in bed looking exhausted but determined. Her eyes lit up when she saw Xavier, and he felt that strange warmth in his chest again. "I brought you something," he said, holding out the book. "I thought you might get bored just lying here." Kate took the book with reverence, running her fingers over the cover. "David Copperfield. I've always wanted to read this. Thank you, Xavier. This is incredibly thoughtful." "It is nothing." But his pleasure at her reaction made it feel like more than nothing. "Dr. Harrison says you are going to be working with Marshal Carter," Kate said, "looking for the men who attacked the wagon train. Word travels fast in a small town. Will it be dangerous?" The concern in her voice surprised him. "I can handle myself, and those men need to be stopped before they hurt anyone else." Kate nodded slowly. "I hope you find them. I hope they face justice for what they have done." They talked for a while longer about inconsequential things, carefully avoiding the topic of the attack and her injuries. Xavier found himself fascinated by her, by the way she thought, the way she spoke. She was educated, well-read, with opinions on everything from politics to poetry. She had traveled more than he had, seen things he could only imagine, and yet there was nothing pretentious about her. She listened when he talked about his work with horses, asking intelligent questions that showed genuine interest. Finally, Harrison poked his head in and gently informed them that Kate needed to rest. Xavier said goodnight reluctantly, looking forward to his next visit. Over the following weeks, a pattern developed. Xavier would spend his days riding with Marshal Carter, searching for signs of the outlaw gang. They found evidence of their presence, campsites, and tracks, but the outlaws stayed frustratingly ahead of them. In the evenings, Xavier would return to town and visit Kate, bringing news of the outside world and engaging in conversations that grew deeper and more personal with each passing day. Kate recovered steadily under Dr. Harrison's care. The fever broke completely after the first week. The wounds began to heal, though Harrison warned they would leave scars. She regained her strength slowly, managing to sit up for longer periods, then to stand and walk a few steps with support. Throughout it all, Xavier was there, encouraging her, cheering her small victories, providing a steady presence she came to rely on. He brought her wildflowers he found during his rides, bright splashes of color that made her smile. She read passages from David Copperfield aloud to him, her voice growing stronger each day. They played chess on a battered board Harrison lent them, and Kate won more often than not, which both frustrated and delighted Xavier. They talked about their pasts, their dreams, the people they had been, and the people they hoped to become. "I always wanted to teach," Kate confessed one evening as they sat together in the gathering dusk. "When I was younger, I imagined myself in a schoolhouse somewhere, helping children learn to read and write. But my mother died when I was 15, and after that it was just my father and me. He needed me, so I put those dreams aside." "You could still teach," Xavier said. "It is not too late." "Maybe, if we ever settle somewhere long enough." Kate smiled, but there was sadness in it. "My father is a good man, but he is always chasing the next big strike. We have lived in 10 different towns in the last 5 years. He's convinced his fortune is just around the next corner." "What do you want, Kate? If you could have anything, what would it be?" She was quiet for a long moment, her green eyes thoughtful. "I want a home. Not just a house, but a real home. Somewhere I could put down roots, build a life. I want to wake up in the same place every morning and know that I belong there. I want stability and safety and peace." She glanced at him. "That probably sounds boring to someone like you, who is used to adventure." "It does not sound boring at all," Xavier said quietly. "It sounds like everything worth having." Their eyes met and held, and something passed between them in that moment, something Xavier felt in his bones. He was falling for her. He had been falling since the moment he lifted her in his arms in that abandoned trading post, and with each day, each conversation, each smile she gave him, he fell a little harder. But he did not say anything. It was too soon, too complicated. She was still recovering from trauma. She had a father waiting for her in Tucson, a life she needed to return to. Xavier was just the man who happened to find her, who happened to be there while she healed. He had no right to these feelings, no right to hope for anything more than her recovery. 3 weeks after Kate woke up, her father arrived in Vulture City. Thomas Mercer was a weathered man in his 50s with graying hair and the deeply tanned skin of someone who spent his life outdoors. He burst into Dr. Harrison's office like a storm, demanding to see his daughter. Xavier was there when it happened, and he watched as Kate's face lit up with joy at seeing her father, even as something in his own chest twisted painfully. The reunion was tearful and emotional. Thomas held his daughter carefully, mindful of her still healing injuries, and Xavier could see the love between them. He quietly excused himself, feeling like an intruder on their private moment. He did not visit Kate that evening or the next day. Her father was with her, and that was as it should be. Xavier told himself it was fine, that he had always known this was temporary. Kate would recover fully, and then she would leave with her father, go to Tucson or wherever Thomas's next prospecting venture took them. Xavier would go back to breaking horses and the solitary life he had always lived, but the absence of her company left a hole in his days that nothing else could fill. On the 3rd day after Thomas's arrival, Kate sent word through Dr. Harrison that she wanted to see Xavier. He almost refused, not sure he could face saying goodbye, but he could not deny her, so he went. He found Kate sitting in a chair by the window, fully dressed for the first time since he had found her. She wore a simple green dress that matched her eyes, and her dark hair was arranged in a neat braid. She looked healthy, vibrant, more like the woman she must have been before the attack. "You have been avoiding me," she said without preamble. Xavier felt heat rise to his face. "Your father is here. I thought you would want time with him." "My father sleeps at the boarding house and visits during the day. The evenings have been very lonely without you." There was a note of reproach in her voice. "Did you just plan to stop coming and never say goodbye?" "I thought it would be easier." "Easier for whom?" Kate stood up, moving to face him. The movement was still careful, but she was steady on her feet now. "Xavier, we need to talk about something. About what happens next. You are going to Tucson with your father. You're going to recover fully and go back to your life. That is what happens next." Xavier forced the words out, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Is that what you want?" The question caught him off guard. "What I want does not matter. It matters to me." Kate took a step closer. "Xavier, these past weeks, talking with you, spending time with you, it has meant everything to me. You are not just the man who saved my life. You are the man who gave me hope when I had none, who made me laugh when all I wanted to do was cry, who showed me that there is still goodness in this world, even after what happened to me." Kate. Her name was barely a whisper. "Let me finish, please." She took a breath. My father wants me to go to Tucson with him, but I have been thinking. I've been following my father from place to place for years, and I'm tired of it. I want what I told you I wanted, a home, a place to belong. And I think I might have found that here, in this dusty little town in the middle of nowhere. If you want me to stay, I will stay. Xavier's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. You cannot make that decision because you feel grateful to me. This is not about gratitude. Kate's voice was fierce. This is about how I feel when you walk into a room, about how your voice is the first thing I want to hear in the morning and the last thing at night, about how safe I feel when you are near and how lost I feel when you are not. I'm not asking you to marry me right now, Xavier. I know it is too soon for that. But I'm asking if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, because if you do, I want the chance to see where this could go. Every rational part of Xavier's mind told him this was too fast, too intense, born of extraordinary circumstances rather than real feeling. But his heart did not care about rational arguments. His heart had been hers since the moment he lifted her broken body and promised her she would be all right. I feel it, he said, his voice rough. God help me, Kate, I feel all of it. I've been trying not to because I thought you would leave and it would destroy me when you did. Joy blazed across her face. Then I'm staying. If Vulture City will have me, I'm staying. Xavier closed the distance between them in 2 steps and cupped her face gently in his hands, mindful of her injuries. Are you sure? Your father, your plans, everything you had before. My father will understand, and my plans changed the moment you found me. Kate smiled up at him, that brilliant smile that made his world brighter. Kiss me, Xavier. He did, gently at first because she was still healing, but with all the pent-up emotion of the past weeks behind it. Kate kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands gripping his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. I am going to build you that home, he said. I am going to give you everything you want, stability and safety and peace and a place to belong. We will build it together, Kate corrected. That is how this works. Thomas Mercer wasn't pleased when Kate told him she wanted to stay in Vulture City. There were several tense days of negotiations, with Thomas arguing that she was making a rash decision based on trauma and gratitude. But Kate held firm, and eventually Xavier sat down with Thomas man to man. I know you do not trust this, Xavier said. I know it looks sudden from the outside, but I love your daughter, sir. I want to marry her with your blessing if I can have it, without it if I must. But either way, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making her happy and keeping her safe. Thomas studied him with shrewd eyes. You are a cowboy and a temporary deputy. How do you plan to support a wife? I have money saved from years of work, enough to buy land, start a small ranch. I know horses, and there's always demand for good stock in this territory. It will not be an easy life, but it will be an honest one. And I will work every day of my life to give her the home she wants. There must have been something in Xavier's face that convinced Thomas, because the older man finally sighed and extended his hand. Take care of my girl, Everett. If you hurt her, I will hunt you down, no matter how far I have to travel. If I hurt her, I will make it easy for you to find me, Xavier replied. With Thomas's grudging blessing secured, things moved quickly. Xavier used his savings to purchase a parcel of land on the outskirts of Vulture City, a stretch of desert with good water access and enough grazing land for horses. He drew up plans for a house, something bigger than a cabin but not so grand as to be impractical. He wanted it to be perfect for Kate. Kate, for her part, threw herself into preparing for their life together. She was fully recovered now, the scars from her attack fading, though they would never disappear completely. She took a job helping at the general store, wanting to contribute and get to know the community. She spoke with the town council about the possibility of starting a school, her old dream rekindling in this new context. Marshal Carter and Xavier finally tracked down the outlaw gang in early September. There was a brief, violent confrontation in the hills outside Prescott. When the dust settled, 2 of the outlaws were dead, and the other 3 were in custody. Xavier made sure Kate knew that the men who hurt her would face justice, and he saw some of the shadows lift from her eyes. They married in October in the small church that served as Vulture City's spiritual center. It was a simple ceremony attended by everyone in town, which was not many people but felt like the whole world to Xavier and Kate. Thomas gave his daughter away with tears in his eyes, and Dr. Harrison stood as Xavier's best man. Martha Henderson cried through the entire ceremony and hosted a reception at her boarding house afterward. That night, in the small room at the boarding house where they would live until their house was finished, Xavier held his wife close and marveled at how his life had changed. 4 months ago, he had been a solitary cowboy with no ties and no plans beyond the next job. Now he had a wife he loved more than his own life, a home under construction, and a future that stretched bright and full of promise. "What are you thinking about?" Kate asked, her head resting on his chest. "How lucky I am. How close I came to riding past that trading post without stopping." "But you did not. You stopped and you saved me. And now here we are." Kate tilted her head up to kiss him softly. "This is exactly where we are supposed to be." The house was finished by December, just as the weather turned cold. It was a solid structure with 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a main room with a fireplace Xavier had built with his own hands. He carried Kate over the threshold on a bright winter morning, both of them laughing with pure joy. They spent their first winter together making the house into a home. Kate sewed curtains and arranged furniture they purchased from the general store or built themselves. Xavier worked on establishing his horse breeding business, purchasing quality stock and beginning the slow process of building a reputation. They worked side by side, dreaming aloud about the future, making plans. In the spring, Kate got her school. The town council approved the funding, and they converted an unused building into a 1-room schoolhouse. Kate proved to be a natural teacher, patient and creative, beloved by her students. Xavier would sometimes ride into town in the afternoon just to watch her through the schoolhouse window, gesturing animatedly as she explained some lesson, her face alight with the passion she brought to everything she did. Their first child came in the summer of 1884, 2 years after they married. A boy with Xavier's dark hair and Kate's green eyes, whom they named Thomas after Kate's father. Xavier held his son for the first time and felt something fundamental shift in his soul. He had thought he understood love before, but this was different, deeper, more primal. He looked at Kate, exhausted but radiant in the bed, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude for everything she had given him. Thomas Mercer visited often, delighting in his grandson and reluctantly admitting that Xavier had made good on all his promises. The ranch was thriving, producing quality horses that were in demand throughout the territory. Xavier hired help to handle some of the work, allowing him more time with his growing family. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace, arrived in 1886. She had Kate's delicate features and Xavier's serious nature, even as a baby. Kate juggled teaching with motherhood, bringing the children to school with her when they were small, creating a warm, chaotic environment that the students adored. Life was not without its challenges. There were droughts that tested the ranch, illnesses that frightened them, the constant low-level dangers of frontier life. But they faced everything together, their bond growing stronger with each passing year. In 1888, Arizona began serious discussions about statehood, and Vulture City grew along with the territory. New families arrived, bringing new ideas and energy. The school expanded, requiring a second teacher, and Kate took on the role of head teacher, shaping education policy for the growing community. Xavier's horse ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. His reputation for fair dealing and quality stock spread, and buyers came from as far as California and Texas. He expanded the operation carefully, never growing so large that he lost the personal touch that had built his reputation. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1892, Xavier took Kate up to the ridge that overlooked their property. They stood together watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, the house they had built together visible below, smoke rising from the chimney where their children waited with the housekeeper they had hired to help Kate manage the household and her teaching duties. "Do you ever regret it?" Xavier asked. "Staying here? Choosing this life?" Kate looked at him with surprise. "Regret it? Xavier, this is everything I ever dreamed of and so much more. I have a home that I love, a community that I'm part of, work that matters, and a family that means everything to me. Why would I regret any of that? Because of how it started, Because of what you had to go through. Kate was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. What happened to me was terrible, and I would not wish that experience on anyone. But it brought me here, to you, to this life. I do not believe everything happens for a reason, but I do believe we can find meaning in even the worst experiences. You turned the worst day of my life into the beginning of the best life I could have imagined. Xavier pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. I love you. I will never stop being grateful that I found you. And I love you. Kate smiled up at him. You know what I was thinking about today? That trading post where you found me? It is still standing last I heard, empty and falling apart, but still there. What about it? I want to buy it. I want to turn it into something good, maybe a way station for travelers, a place where people can find help and shelter, a place where something good came from something terrible. Kate looked at him earnestly. What do you think? Xavier thought about that dim, dusty interior where he had first seen Kate, about the smell of blood and fear that had permeated that space, about how much had changed since that day. I think that is perfect. I think you should do it. They purchased the old Jenkins trading post and spent months renovating it. Kate oversaw the project with characteristic determination, transforming the space where she had nearly died into a bright, welcoming way station. They hired a family to run it, providing meals and shelter to travelers at reasonable prices. Word spread, and the way station became known as a safe haven on a dangerous road. Their third child, another boy they named Samuel after the man who had originally built the trading post, arrived in 1893. By then, Thomas was 12 and helping his father with the horses, showing natural talent with the animals. Grace was 7 and already learning to read at a level far beyond her years, making Kate proud. The years rolled on, each one adding depth to the tapestry of their life together. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Kate's school became one of the best in the territory. Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, and they celebrated along with everyone else, proud to be part of the new state's history. By their 25th wedding anniversary in 1907, Xavier's hair was showing threads of silver, and Kate wore reading glasses when she worked on lesson plans. But when he looked at her, he still saw the woman he had carried in his arms all those years ago, the woman who had fought her way back from death with fierce determination. They stood together on their porch that anniversary evening, watching the sun set over the desert they had made home. Their children were grown now. Thomas was running the ranch, preparing to take over fully when Xavier was ready to step back. Grace had gone to college in California and returned to teach at her mother's school. Samuel was working as a deputy marshal, following in Xavier's footsteps in a way that both terrified and filled his parents with pride. 25 years, Kate said softly. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like it just started yesterday. Best 25 years of my life, Xavier replied, slipping his arm around her waist. Mine too. Kate leaned into him, fitting perfectly against his side as she always had. Do you remember what you told me that first night when you sat with me in Dr. Harrison's office? I told you a lot of things that night. You told me I had to stay and see how beautiful the world was, that there were sunrises that would take my breath away and stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. Kate looked up at him, her green eyes still as striking as they had been that first day. You were right, about all of it. Xavier kissed her then, there on the porch of the home they had built together, with the desert spreading endlessly around them and the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. 25 years had not dimmed his love for her. If anything, it had grown deeper, richer, more essential to his existence. They had built a life from tragedy, found love in the aftermath of violence, and created something beautiful and lasting in one of the harshest environments on earth. Their story had started with blood and fear and desperation, but it had become something so much more. It had become a testament to the power of hope, the strength of love, and the resilience of the human spirit. As the years continued to pass, Xavier and Kate grew old together, but never apart. They remained each other's first thought in the morning and last words at night. They weathered the challenges that came with age, caring for each other through illnesses and injuries with the same tenderness they had shown from the beginning. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management, and he eventually married a local woman named Ellen, giving Xavier and Kate 4 grandchildren to dote on. Grace married a teacher from Phoenix, and they settled in Vulture City, adding their own children to the growing family. Samuel married late but happily to a woman he met while working as a marshal in Tucson. Kate continued teaching well into her 60s, finally retiring only when her health demanded it. The school board named the schoolhouse after her, a tribute to her decades of dedication. Xavier scaled back his work at the ranch gradually, spending more time with Kate, taking slow rides through the desert they had always loved, sitting on the porch watching the grandchildren play. In 1920, Xavier and Kate celebrated their 38th wedding anniversary. They were in their 60s now, both weathered by time and life, but still deeply devoted to each other. They held a large celebration at the ranch, with all their children and grandchildren present, along with friends from throughout the state. That evening, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Xavier and Kate sat together on their porch, as they had done thousands of times before. Kate's hand was in his, her fingers entwined with his own. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. "I have been thinking," Kate said eventually, "about that day you found me, about how my whole life changed in an instant." "We have lived a good life," Xavier said. "We have lived a wonderful life." Kate squeezed his hand. "And it is all because you noticed something was wrong, because you cared enough to stop and help a stranger, because you carried me to safety when I could not save myself. You saved yourself by surviving until I got there. All I did was give you a chance. You gave me everything," Kate corrected gently. "A home, a family, a purpose, a love that has sustained me through every challenge. You gave me a reason to fight to live, and then you gave me a life worth living." Xavier turned to look at her, this woman who had been the center of his world for nearly 4 decades. Even now, with her hair silver and her face lined with age, she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "I would do it all again," he said, "every single moment. I would ride past that trading post 1,000 times just for the chance to find you once." "I know," Kate smiled, that same brilliant smile that had captivated him from the start. "I love you, Xavier Everett. I have loved you since you held my hand through the fever. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Katerina Mercer Everett. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They sat together under the stars, 2 people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances and built the best of lives. They had survived tragedy, created joy, raised a family, and built a legacy that would extend far beyond their own years. Their love story, born in blood and pain, had transformed into something beautiful and enduring. The smell of blood and infection had been replaced by the smell of home cooking and desert flowers. The wounds had healed into scars that served as reminders of survival rather than tragedy. The cowboy who had carried a dying woman to the doctor had become a husband, a father, a grandfather, a pillar of his community. The woman who had nearly died alone in an abandoned building had become a beloved teacher, a devoted mother, a cornerstone of everything good in Vulture City. Their story was one told and retold in the area, becoming part of local legend. The way station they had created from the trading post where they met continued to serve travelers for decades, a monument to their belief in turning tragedy into hope. Their children carried forward their values, raising their own families with the same dedication to community and love that Xavier and Kate had modeled. In the end, theirs was a love story that transcended the violence of its beginning. It was a testament to the truth that even in the darkest moments, hope could survive. That even in the harshest environments, love could flourish, that a single act of compassion could ripple outward, changing not just 2 lives, but entire generations. Xavier and Kate Everett lived long lives, surrounded by family and love until their final days. They died within months of each other in 1925, both in their late 60s, having lived to see Arizona transform from wild territory to modern state. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, under the endless Arizona sky they had both loved so dearly. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren continued their legacy. The ranch remained in the family, passing from generation to generation. The school that bore Kate's name educated thousands of students over the decades. The way station eventually became a historical landmark, preserved as a reminder of the area's history and the remarkable couple who had transformed it from a place of death into a symbol of hope. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the desert wind blows just right, people swear they can feel something in the air around that old place. Not the smell of blood and fear that once permeated it, but something else entirely. Something warm and bright and full of promise. Something that feels exactly like love. The story of Xavier and Kate became more than just a tale of survival and romance. It became a reminder that our worst moments do not define us, that courage can be found in the darkest places, that love, real love, does not require perfect circumstances. Sometimes it requires only two people willing to see each other truly, to fight for each other fiercely, and to build something beautiful from the rubble of tragedy. Xavier had noticed the smell before he saw the wounds, but what he found in that abandoned trading post was not just a dying woman. He found his future, his purpose, his reason for everything that would come after. He carried her to the doctor, but in many ways she carried him too. She gave his life meaning and direction. She transformed his solitary existence into something rich and full. Together, they proved that even in the harsh reality of the Wild West, where violence was common and life was cheap, love could still triumph, hope could still flourish, and two people could still find each other against all odds and build something that would last long after they were gone. Their legacy was not just in the children they raised, or the businesses they built, or the community they served. Their legacy was in the story itself, in the reminder that compassion matters, that stopping to help a stranger can change the course of multiple lives, that love is worth fighting for, no matter how unlikely its beginning. Xavier and Kate Everett's love story began with tragedy, but ended with triumph, and in between was a life lived fully, loved deeply, and remembered fondly by all who knew them. The Wild West was a hard place, unforgiving to the weak and cruel to the unlucky. But it was also a place where remarkable things could happen, where people could reinvent themselves, where love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances. Xavier and Kate's story was Wild West romance at its finest, raw and real and ultimately redemptive. It proved that even when everything seemed darkest, even when death seemed certain, hope could survive. And sometimes, just sometimes, that hope could transform into something more beautiful than anyone could have imagined.